So welcome to the Kanban Coaching Exchange this evening. It's good to see you all. Good to see you got your cameras on as well. This evening, I'd like to welcome Pierre LeBlanc, all the way from Canada, hence why we were talking about things that I'd like to do in Canada. Pierre has been a member of the Kanban community for many, many years now and works across both Canada and Europe. He is a trainer and coach, but in his past, he's also been a developer, which I always think is great skills to be able to come up and get that experience. He's also been a scrum master, leader, and entrepreneur. And he's a real regular on the speaking conference circuit and has got many great things to share throughout the many, many years of knowledge that he's gained. So I'm going to hand you over to Pierre. Take it away.
Well, thank you, Helen. So let me start by sharing my presentation. So yes, I'm Pierre. I'm just going to introduce myself a little bit. Well, Helen did quite a good job, so I'm not going to spend too much time. But just so you know, I've started a company called Kanban Quebec. My goal is really to spread Kanban in French, especially in Canada and in France or other European countries. I've been to Switzerland many times. Actually, my wife is from Switzerland, so that's why I've been. And it led me eventually to appreciate traveling to Europe. And mostly I'm doing speeches in French in France. But today, special occasion, I'm gonna do this in English because I love the UK. I've only been once in Belfast, but I'd love to go back, especially visit London and visit Scotland as well. We'll see when the prices of tickets are lower, hopefully. Okay, so I'm not gonna spend too much time on this, but right now I'm in a company where I'm working on a transformation, and I've been doing this for quite some time. Been an agile coach since 2015, and a Kanban trainer since 2017. And I've kind of developed my own ways of thinking about all of this, but I'm really attuned with the Kanban University knowledge base, especially the Kanban maturity model. I welcome feedback on this presentation. You can contact me through LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest way. And this presentation is still work in progress. There's quite a lot of slides, but we'll see. It's a story I'm telling you, and I'll introduce it in a few moments. But if you are so kind to connect with me on LinkedIn and give me feedback after the presentation, I would appreciate it. Now, a little disclaimer. I'm gonna be depicting some historical events and some wartime events, and this is no way meant as a judgment on the people involved. I'm gonna speak about wartime for hundreds of years ago, and also a little bit about World War II, and also I'm gonna talk about religion, but mainly in the inside the culture I've been born into, the French Canadian culture. And again, it's not any kind of judgment on people, religious people today. And English is my second language, so it's quite possible I say funny things. Just bear with me. It may be just coincidental, or it may be premeditated. We'll see. Okay, so who is this presentation for? Well, it's for you, agile coaches, change agents, transformation sponsor, leaders. And I'm going to talk, I'm going to make some parallel with my ideas and the Kanban maturity model, which I'm sure you already know about, but just in case, here's the link. And the premise of this talk is that most organizational change focuses on practices. It starts in the wrong place. This is why it often fails. So you know the mantra, probably. Outcomes follow practices, practices follow culture, culture follow values, therefore lead with values. And today I'm going to focus mainly on the second sentence, practices follow culture. And inside the KMM knowledge base, we have this equation: culture equals values times behavior. And we define here values is a reflection of our identity, and behaviors are decisions and actions, uh, mainly from the leader's perspective. But I'm going to add a little bit to this. For me, the building blocks of culture is we can make a parallel between the society and an organization, a company. So we have several aspects: environment, language, customs and rituals, beliefs and narratives, symbolism, people, and inherited DNA, which is kind of the subject of my talk, and then a historical legacy. So we see here in this table, we see the kind of the parallel between the society and the organization, and I'm gonna pick some example in these two columns for the talk. And so what I'm gonna add is, in terms of identity, I'm gonna speak about the inherited DNA, and in terms of decision and action or behavior, we're gonna talk about historical legacy. Okay, let's get started. I had the idea of this talk after I did just some ancestry DNA testing on this. Maybe you know this website, ancestry.com, where you can build your own family tree. And so I ended up with this result where I've had according to them, 89% French DNA, which, if you meet any French person from France, probably none of them have a higher level of French DNA. And so that my question came like this: how is this possible? How is this possible? Well, you can explain it because if you think about the history of Canada, my French ancestor migrated from France to the New World in the 1600s. They were Catholics, they were settlers trying to survive in a harsh environment. They were mostly poor and hardworking, and they were in a tight-knitted community. They did not have a choice but to be very close to each other, to help each other, and to survive in this environment. If you think about it, they came from Europe. They ended up in a land where you only have forests and you have to start from scratch, basically. They were also suspicious of outsider. So if we were to take a look at this from the KMM perspective, with the three social aspects, they were probably, in terms of social innovation, very conservative. I would say conservative, but maybe they were a little bit less conservative than other Europeans, because they decided to migrate and take this dangerous journey. But once they were there, they started rebuilding or reproducing what they knew from Europe with the means they had. So they didn't necessarily try to reinvent the wheel. In terms of trust or social capital, they probably had very low trust, very suspicious of outsider, and that's why they probably did not mix much with the native and eventually other culture that visited the New World as well. And they were a tight group. So in terms of social cohesion, you could probably say change was easier. However, because of the two other items or two other aspects, conservative and low trust, it probably balanced out the fact that they had a tight group. But change within the group could potentially be good or easier. However, they were isolated, so maybe not so much. And they had lots of children. Of course, they were Catholics, so they had big families, like 10, 15, 20 children per couple. So that's why we still speak French in Canada today, because these few hundred people, well, they kind of became today about 8 million people. And so if you take a look at my ancestry, my genealogy, and you take, let's say, 15 generations, will bring us roughly to the 1500s. How many people is that? Well, it's about 65,000 people who made all these decisions, all these difficult decisions, sometimes life-threatening decisions. Should we move here? Should we build our house here? Should we have children, etc., etc.? So that's roughly 33,000 men, 33,000 women who decided or made decisions so that today I'm here in front of you doing this speech. So that's a lot of decision making. And that's what we can say about this. Lots of decision making, risky, life altering decisions. They migrated thousands of miles, they fought wars, they worked their land, they built houses, they had children. And all these decisions that brought me here today, well, I cannot undo any of these decisions, right? It's there, it's the past. We cannot change the past. We can only look forward. And even if I don't, we are looking forward from this point, well, I don't necessarily have to follow the same path. I can change the path. And so the context I am in today is my starting point, and the same goes for your organization when it comes to change. You have to start at your starting point. So how many people made decisions in your organization before today that led to this context that you're in? That's an important question. In my opinion, we need to start from here. We can take a look at the past. We cannot change the past. We have to accept that the current context is the result of all these decisions that were made before. Past decision may seem right or wrong from today's point of view, but they were made from another context, another starting point. There's no need for judgment here. We can keep going, but we don't have to follow the same path. But today is our starting point. And so how do you understand your starting point? Well, if you are accustomed to Kanban knowledge, well, you have this social aspects that you can evaluate that will help you determine if you are in an environment where change is easier or harder. And then you can use a static approach to refine workflows specifically. But this is kind of two level of starting points: the overall organizational change and a more precise or more specific change at the workflow level. Now, okay, so what if there's a change of management, but you don't necessarily change the people? Now, I'm going to do this analogy with what happened in North America during these war between, well, everybody knows that the French and the British were at war for hundreds of years, and they fought with Spain as well to kind of get a hold on the New World, what we know today as Canada and the United States, and also Mexico. And so before 1763, most of North America was French, except for the 13 colonies, which were on the East Coast. But the French, they lost the war, and they lost the war to the British. And what happened is there was a treaty signed in 1763 where France, they gave most of North America to the British. They kept a few islands just for fishing. But the context here is that 70,000 French settlers were left behind. They stayed here. They stayed where today we have the province of Quebec. And overnight they became British subjects. And but the treaty allowed them to retain their language, their religion, and the common law. So how did the British prevent an uprising from the French Canadians? They were called Canadians at the time, but let's say the French settlers. Well, they did not impose big changes to the culture. They let them, and this little snippet of text here is the wording of the treaty itself. and that's why the spelling is a little bit different. It's old spelling. And the original text was written in French. So they decided, you know what? It's fine. 70,000 people. You can keep your language, your religion, your land. If you want to move, we'll give you safe passage. I didn't put that part here, but basically they were free to continue their lives as they already knew how to live. Now, the thing is, most of them were born there. They were not necessarily French migrants. They were maybe the third, fourth, fifth generations of settlers. So they were Canadians. They were no longer French. So they had nowhere to go, basically. So they stayed. And so this is one important aspect of the KMM is culture is sticky. Culture is sticky. You don't change culture by trying to change the culture. That's exactly what happened with Canada. There was a war, change of management, same employees. Well, let's not change the culture overnight. Does that make sense? I think for me it's super important to keep this in mind when we come into an organization. Most most people I've met, most managers, when you change, let's say you change the vice president or the manager, or there's a new change agent, first thing they want to do is change things. They want to change to a way they know and a way that work elsewhere doesn't mean it's going to work here. So the first step is step back and understand the culture. And so, in this environment, I'm going back to the colonies here. We are in 1763 and up to the 1800s. So imagine you are a settler, you are you're inhabitant of a harsh land. It's you're in survival mode. There's a new management. Basically, we lose the leadership. It's being replaced now. They were very religious, so they were very into going to the church, and they were repeated always. There's a better world, better life after that's coming up, right? After in the afterlife, mostly, but there is the promise of a better life in the future if you work hard and you follow the rituals and the rules and the customs. So they would marry in a tight-knitted community. They have a large family, and having many children will create hardship, and hardship requires help from above. So they were praying, they were going to the church, and it's a cycle. It's a conservative cycle because you reinforce the fact that you have to believe to go through hardship, and because of this, you create more hardship, basically. But the common theme here is beliefs. People believes they believe something greater will come if they work hard. And so in your organization is probably the same thing. If you have, for example, you have a company that's not going too well, and then there's a, let's say, a merger. We merge two companies together. There will be some hardship for sure. There will be cuts. There will be people losing their jobs. There will be very sad moments. But there's a promise. There's always at some point a speech from the new leadership that says, there's a better world coming up. And then what happens is sometimes there are new silos formed from tight-knitted communities inside the companies amongst employees. Then we have to work on large project because we need to get back on track quickly, right? And so large projects create hardship, and hardship requires help from above. Now it's not about praying anymore, but it's about reaching out to the leadership and complaining and saying, well, we need more employees, we need more of this, more of that, we need this and this and that. And then there's new promises. There will be a better world after that, the hardship, and so on and so on. So it's a kind of a cycle, and we live in a world, in a company where we believe there will be something better in the near future because we work hard, there will be results, and so on and so on. Now, this is some really conservative behavior beliefs. The beliefs of the better world, the beliefs generate rules, and rules generate practices, basically. So I have a few examples, a real life example that I've experienced myself. For example, Kanban is for lazy people. Rule, no Kanban allowed. It's only Scrum. And that's what we'll do. We'll use Scrum everywhere. But now, if you have similar experience as I have, Scrum does not always work. Sometimes you need something else. You need Kanban. And I have other example. Let's say we cannot say no. We cannot say no. What it means is if a manager asks for something, we have to do it. That's the rule. And the practice is when the manager asks for something, you drop everything, and this is your new top priority, right? And so all these beliefs create rules, could be official rules or unofficial rules, but it leads to putting practices in place. And sometimes you will have to fight beliefs if you want to remove rules so that you can change your practices. And most often, the transformation will focus on practices, but they don't necessarily change rules or change beliefs. So they kind of are stuck with all of these rules that are in place, and we try to change practices, but we are being stopped because of these other aspects. So maybe you need to fight beliefs. Now, beliefs is really much into emotion, right? So before you want to change the practice, you need to understand it, where it comes from. Why does this rule exist? Is it a law or regulation? Is it rules that were meant to be to help during a specific period? Is there a belief that created this rule? So if there is it a strong belief or a weak belief? So some beliefs are weak, and one of them is, and I was like this when I was a kid. I absolutely believed that eating carrots would help my eyesight. But this is completely false. This comes from a World War II propaganda from the UK when well, they actually invented the radar, and they didn't want to tell anyone there was a radar. And they said, you know what, our pilots are so good at night because they eat carrots. They see the airplanes coming to us because they eat carrots. And so there was this huge propaganda, including posters, and they were advertising recipe with carrots and so on and so on. And probably it also came to Canada as well. I don't know. I did not find any clues that the same propaganda existed in Canada, but I remember clearly my parents and my grandparents saying, eat carrots, it's good for your eyesight. So the thing is, I say it's a weak belief because as soon as I heard the scientific facts, I stopped believing it. But then again, there is no real consequence at eating carrots. I still eat carrots and I like it. It's not very it's not a drastic change for me. Now, some beliefs are strong and they need emotional shock. For example, this is Steve Ballmer from Microsoft. Back when the iPhone started in 2007 in the US, um, he said, you know what, $1,000 phone with no keyboard, it will never work. He truly believed that. But then the world changed, right? So it needed for him, there was a need for kind of an emotional shock to accept that a phone, a $1,000 phone with no keyboard is viable on the market. And so sometimes you have also rules that are that you can where you can find workarounds, right? So, for example, if you take a look at the Christians or especially the Catholics, they eat fish on Fridays. Why do they eat fish on Fridays? It's just a custom. It's to honor Jesus' sacrifice on Good Friday, right? So they abstain from meat and they are allowed to eat fish. But in Canada, in the harsh environment, the church said, you know what? You can eat beavers on Fridays because beavers, they live in the water and they are probably fish, right? It's not a scientific fact, but it's kind of a workaround, a convenient workaround for an inconvenient rule. And it's something you can also practice in your organization. I'm not talking about eating beavers, but I mean finding convenient workarounds for inconvenient rules. So here's a few ways you can change practices. For example, if there's a weak belief, you can present a scientific proof. Maybe you will be able to change the rule or not, but at least you set the record straight. If you have an inconvenient rule, maybe you can find a workaround. You don't necessarily, you can change the practice, but you don't necessarily attack the belief. Then, if there's a strong belief, you're going to need to create a stronger emotion, stronger incentive to maybe create a new belief. Prove them not by metrics or by scientific facts, but prove them or incite them to change their mind to a stronger emotion. Sometimes you have fear-driven practices. So the idea would be here to reduce the risk gradually, or at least the perceived risk gradually, make people more willing to try new practices. Sometimes, well, I've seen this often, people cheat the rules because they are inconvenient, but they don't necessarily cheat it all the time. They cheat it when it makes sense. So the idea is maybe there should be an alternative, or there are places where this rule don't apply. But you need to discuss this and convince people that maybe they could remove this rule. And then your rule would reinforce probably the original belief, but it will help establish new practices. Sometimes there's a rule, nobody knows why this rule exists. It was put in place a long time ago. People are gone. It's part of the legacy. So what we can do is run a safe to fail experiment and maybe temporarily removing the rule, see what happens. And you will probably discover some good information on why this rule exists. And if it still provides value, that's fine. Otherwise, you can remove it. So a cultural change in a conservative culture, sometimes it's a bottom up approach in the sense that leadership will let changes occur at the bottom level, but it definitely needs support from leaders and ideally inspiring leaders. Now you can detect a conservative environment through listening to the language, what you hear. These are real life event or sentences that I heard. For example, our culture is so different, this won't work. Or we don't have a choice, we cannot say no. Or we've always done it this way. Or the worst is, this is not how it works in real life. As if I'm just making up, you know, practices or pulling practices out of my hat. It's not when I bring Agile or Scrum or Kanban, it's not, I didn't invent this. I'm just sharing my knowledge. But some people, I've never heard of this. It's so alien to them that they don't believe it, right? Okay, now there's this book that I really appreciate. It's called The Three Laws of Performance, and these are the three laws basically. This summarizes the book. The three laws are as follow: how people perform correlates to how situations occur to them. How a situation occurs arises in language, And future-based language, this is the important part, future-based language transforms how situations occur to people. So this resonates with me. Future-based language. How do you change an organization or a culture if you don't speak with words that represent the new ways of working that you want to put in place? And I'm going to give you some example of conservative versus future-based language. And it could even be inside an agile approach, for example, and I've heard this often, an agile project manager. Before agile, we had a project manager. Now we have an agile project manager. So you're not really changing the language. You're just adding words that means nothing in this context. So that would be an agile conservative context, right? But in an agile, let's say an agile liberal, a future-based language would be, no, there's no such thing as an agile project manager. You're just making up words that don't exist. You have product owners, you have demand managers, you have request managers, and same with before we had requirements. Now they are stories, but basically they're the same thing. It's just we changed the word because this is agile. But no, it's not stories. It's, well, you can have user stories, but they are really product backlog items, work items, and they are divided into work item types, right? So this is more future-based language. So I have a few examples on this slide, and by the way, I can share the slide deck after the presentation if you want. So going back to the story of my region of this earth, many things changed in the 1940s. The conservative culture evolved. We had well, women gained the right to vote. We have now school is mandatory at least until 14 years old. Today it's 18, but back then in the 40s was 14. We kind of invested into hydroelectricity. We nationalized electricity in the province, so it became kind of a revenue stream for the province. Well, after World War II, there was the post-war transition, industrial growth, urban growth, and we adopted a new flag. A flag is a symbol. Flag is important because it's a symbol of your identity. But most importantly, the most important part, ice hockey. Ice hockey changed everything in Quebec. Why? It's because after the war that ended in 1763, it was called the 7-Year War, or the French Indian War in North America. After Canada became a British dominion, or where French settlers became British subjects, there was kind of two classes of citizens. There were the British rulers and the French settlers who were still there, and it lasted until the 1940s, basically. Now, I'm not saying it was a form of apartheid or anything. It was just like two classes of citizens where the British people were mostly managers, leaders, politicians, thought leaders, and the French Canadians were mostly workers. But the ice hockey, what it did is it created icon. It kind of replaced the Catholic religion. People turned to hockey for icons, basically. And so it actually created many French Canadian icons because they were good at it. They were good at sport. They were as good as other Canadians. So it created kind of heroes, if you will. I'm going to call them leaders or icons, because they were able, and that's the important thing, they were able to achieve the same thing as the English-speaking Canadians. And what it did is kind of remove this gap in terms of these two classes of citizens. Now, French Canadians were able to do the same thing, and through education and so on, they started even working in politics, management, and so on. So in our organization, we also need icons, not necessarily a hero, but a leader, inspirational leader, someone who makes us believe in ourselves, someone relatable, someone approachable, someone who's able to make difficult decisions and is certainly able to lead, meaning show the direction and bring people with him. So inspiring leaders influence the evolution of culture. And so that's a little bit why French Canadians they evolved maybe faster after the 1940s and 50s because of that. Because we had icons, we had heroes we can relate to. Because hockey players were ordinary people. They would work in the plants like anybody else. Because at the time they were not they were professionals, but they were not paid like they are today. They were playing in the teams and they were paid very little money to do this. So they had to keep a job on the side. And so, what if the identity of an organization changed? For example, Canada started as New France, and then in 1763, the French lost the war. It became British North America, and then it became the Dominion of Canada. And today, it's known as Canada. But the identity of the organization changed, not necessarily the people. Same people, new identity, or an evolution of the identity. Now you'll see that even during World War II, the official flag of Canada was the British flag, basically. The other one here, it's called the Red Ensign, was unofficial. We would use it, but it was unofficial. The official flag was basically the British flag. Now, I would be keen to know what are your thinking on these poster where you see French language with the British flag. I thought it was interesting to show you these posters, and even this one that says "This is your flag." Well, this is still a Canadian poster for World War II, and we also have a few Beaver team motivational poster here. So the beaver was still the national animal of Canada, so it was very. It was used in these poster basically. Now, sometimes you want to build unity through. Oh, I forgot to say unity with symbols like a flag or it could be a logo. Unity through diversity. Here we appeal to women, we appeal to French Canadian, and we appeal to Irish Canadian as well, with different posters. And this one, interesting. The middle one is actually saying hey, remember we're French. Remember, and it also name the same soldiers who fought the British back in the 1700. But this poster was aimed to bring people into. I think this one is maybe for the First World War, but basically it's to incite French Canadian to join the army. So it was very much aimed at French Canadians. And so you built also unity through leadership with icons. I spoke about the hockey. It could be soldiers. It could be this woman, Thérèse Casgrain. She actually was instrumental into bringing women to be able to vote in Canada. And so when you hire people in your organization, especially when you want change, new hires, people you hire in your company, they should embody the future culture you want. It is tempting to hire people who think like us, but to evolve, we need diversity. So definitely leaders should hire people who have different ways of thinking so that we can actually help the company, the organization towards a future. Okay, so it went a little bit faster than I thought. I think we still have 15 minutes, Ellen, I think. Okay, so let me share my final insights on this. So organization are kind of inherited system. That's what the DNA part of my thinking is this. So decisions create structure, structure influences beliefs, beliefs generate rules, rules create practices, and practices reinforce culture. And of course, it's like a self-fulfilling circle. Culture reinforces beliefs, rules, and practices. That's why outcomes follow practices, practices follow culture, and culture follows values, therefore lead with values. If you want to influence culture, you still need to address beliefs, or in the KMM, we're talking about emotions basically. You need to fight emotions with stronger emotions. You need to fight belief with stronger beliefs, or use the emotions related to these beliefs. So to create sustainable change, you may need to address beliefs first. Uh, Change starts with understanding. You have to know your starting point. Understand why such and such practices exist. What is the belief behind it? What fear it protects? What's the identity attached to it? Remember that today is your starting point. And so, what cultural legacy will you leave in your organization? It may be new language, it may be a new flag or symbols, it may be new icons, new leaders, new beliefs, new rules and practices. You have to keep in mind that maturity is not something you install, it's something that a culture grows into, whether it's a culture, a society, or an organization. Here it is. So, like I said, this is a work in progress. This is something I'm building, I'm working on, and I'd love to hear your questions or your thoughts on this.
Brilliant. Let's give Pierre a round of applause. Thank you very much, Pierre.
Thank you.
What questions have we got for him? Who's going to kick us off? Pop it in the chat channel if you don't feel so comfortable speaking out loud. I'll kick us off with a question if you like. So when you work with organizations, Pierre, like
Yeah.
what indicators are you specifically looking for to know like if we've got a good culture or a bad culture? What are some of the things that really stick out to you?
Well, okay. So I don't necessarily judge the culture, but the fact is, I end up in most of the time I end up in very conservative organization, especially if it's an old organization and there's a transformation going on.
Mm,
I listen to the language. Like I said earlier, an agile project manager or a business product owner or technical product owner. These are like, I would say, placeholder words to mean we don't really want to change. We want to stay the same, but we're going to plug in agile wordings because it allows us to check boxes, basically.
mhm.
There's a transformation going on. We need to do this. Let's put it in place. The result is not important. The important part is we kind of adopt the language even though there's no results. So this is often what I experience. Now, one more thing is most agile coaches I've met, they know little about Kanban and they know little about lean and workflows. And so it's very hard to make changes when you have a group of coaches and half of them know nothing about that and they want to go in one way and the other half goes in another way. So it's kind of very hard. But these are the things that I witness in organization that tells me this group needs help, but there's so far I can go. And that's when the KMM is important. It tells me I can mostly work at level one, trying to bring them level two, because they mostly focus on creating agile teams.
Thank you, Pierre. Over to you, Tomo.
Thank you. So I've learned the hard way that you can't solve the problem until you ask the organization what the problem is. But that's
That's true.
bad. But sometimes I start at the bottom and ask the people really doing the work, and then the managers distrust the whole thing because it's not part of the plan. And sometimes I
Yeah.
ask the managers first, then the employees distrust it because it's part of that old plan. What do you suggest?
Yeah, well, the places I've seen where agile or an agile mindset work is when the leaders they know what agile is. They support it. They've been trained. They ask the right questions, and places where and I've seen it also many times. The managers they don't feel concerned. Do your agile things. Don't ask me questions, right? This is where it fails because bottom up, you can influence a few people, you can probably insert a few practices, but if there's not a high level change like a top down approach, the changes will not stick.
Mm.
It will be erased at some point. So I
Yeah.
usually prefer like a middle up and middle down at the same
Mm.
time, but it's very hard to find this. We definitely need support from leaders, and they need the courage to say, "I trust you," even though they don't understand what you're doing. It's pretty rare.
Good, thank you.
Oops, sorry about that.
And like what kind of obviously you mentioned the KMM is going to help you there. But like what sort of things do you when you find maybe and you listen to the language and you find the culture isn't particularly good, like what are some of the things like your techniques that you use to try and reflect that back onto the organization to help them be self-aware?
Mm. Well, most of the time in an agile transformation, we install Scrum first, and then if we're lucky, we are able to insert a little Kanban here and there. Now, what I do often is I extract Kanban metrics from even an agile Scrum team from, let's say, software like Jira. I extract it, and I can prove them that, let's say, they have a throughput of 3 items per week, regardless of story points, regardless of absence or anything else. And with this, I can prove that what I'm saying, I can relate numbers to what I'm saying, in the sense that you know what, regardless what you're doing, your throughput is let's say very not standard, but the pacing you can predict it basically, and from there we can start looking at the ratio. If it's below, I think it's 5.4 if you do the 98 percentile divided by the 58 percentile. Now, just this gives me a good indication if it's a kind of a stable environment or unstable. And I go from there. I start proving what I'm saying. Even sometimes they're not listening to it, but at least I have my toolbox with me. And sometimes I'm lucky and I speak to a manager who understands what I'm saying. And now it's easier to move forward from there.
But sometimes that's quite difficult, isn't it? Because like they don't necessarily know that their behaviors is having an impact on that culture. And obviously you can shine
Mm.
the light with the data and the things like that. But sometimes you have to have like that hard conversation to say, like, it's not us, it's you type thing. So like what experiences or stories have you got to share in that space where maybe you had to have that difficult conversation to talk to them about that culture? And part of them is being the problem.
Yeah, well, most importantly, don't point fingers. I talk about practices. For example, recently there was a group that is forced to work on something because another group didn't plan ahead, and now they need help, and they don't understand what they're doing, so they require the help of specialists. And these people, they were supposed to work on something else. Now, the gap is where? The gap is there's no upstream nowhere. So people who did the let's call it a marketing project, they were unable to forecast that they will need help from a more operational group. So that operational group now is stuck helping them. But where's the gap? The gap is there's no governance in the middle layer. So if we were talking about flight levels, maybe we have like initiatives at the top, which is like a strategy. We have Scrum boards, Kanban boards at the operations level, but there's no middle layer, no level two. So there's no coordination, no governance, and so there's a gap in again communication.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And this you
I
can point this out with no judgment, without pointing fingers. It's just what it is.
I didn't know, Dave. There's quite a lot of information there. Was that just pondering or musing, or is there a question there?
Just sort of some comments based.
Yeah.
I've had similar thoughts to what you've presented, and these are some observations that I've had that go along with some of what you've said.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Thank you,
sorry,
Dave.
I don't see the chat. Let me see. Oh yeah, okay, here it is. Okay. Okay, so you're saying removing agile from phrasing, but the difference between current teams and the type of teams we want is a common goal. They are
So
all
you had
working
said
toward.
that for teams, the
Yeah,
non-prescriptive term was workflow. While there's truth to that, I also think that there is the benefit to actually getting across the idea of a team that is working together for a common goal. Because oftentimes what you get with a team in an organization is X many people thrown together and they're all working on something different, right?
yeah.
And the beauty of Kanban or Agile is that these teams work for a common purpose.
Yeah, and well, for my perspective about the word team is in my market, especially in Quebec or maybe in France as well, the word team is often used in any context for no reason, and that's a big problem because I agree we need teamwork, but we don't really need a team to do teamwork in the sense that the team is a group of people, and if especially if they work every individual work on different things, it's it's counterproductive to call this a team and have them work as a team in the same board and have
Yeah,
the same ceremonies or cadences.
yeah, I agree.
And I do the parallel with sports. For example, you have sports team like hockey or rugby or football. But if you're a tennis player, how big of a team can you do? You
Yeah,
cannot have a team of 20 tennis player, right? It's
yeah.
more an individual sport, right? So it's same in organization. You have teamwork and you have individual work, and both can coexist.
Yes, I think with that specific thing, a lot of organizations don't differentiate between those two types of work that you're talking about. And the important thing to get across is that there is a separate unit as a team that is working together like a sports team to accomplish a
Yep,
specific goal. And those teams should work differently than, say, a working group that has a lot of tasks to do, but is not working towards necessarily a common goal.
exactly. And if you have read the book from Klaus Leopold, why agile teams, rethinking agile, why agile teams are not the solution, basically. Um, it's because the team itself, they could be very good at what they're doing, but they are just a portion of a larger workflow.
Yeah,
And that's the difference between, our workflow and a value stream. Basically,
yeah,
value stream is start with the customer, ends with the customer, but in between you have many workflows.
yes.
Brilliant.
But yes, I
Any?
could
Oh,
eventually update my table. Sorry, Ellen.
sorry, no, I jumped in. Any more questions for Pierre at all?
Can I just ask a simple question?
Yes.
Always, Helen.
So I'm just thinking the differences between sort of Scrum and Kanban and when you would switch to Kanban. So you were talking between the two of you about like having a shared purpose or a shared goal. I found it quite difficult with the team that I have. It's a non-engineering team. Um, Having goals, sprint goals just don't work for them because they are
Mm-hmm.
kind of a bunch of individuals that are they have a common purpose in between all of them. However, they do have different responsibilities and different processes that they have to take through a workflow. And that's why I think that Kanban would suit them much more because we
Yep.
could get more visibility over the work. We've got more flexibility in how we slice and dice the work. Um, we wouldn't be constrained to sort of 2 week windows. We could even get the system, which I think are like a lot what you've talked about this evening is a lot of systems thinking approach. So it's like perhaps we could then work with in the constraint of the rules of the saying, I work on a big program. They say that you must work within 2 week iterations, time boxes. So, we could do cleaning down the Kanban board every week and go with that, refreshing it every week, but still working within the rules of the system.
Mm-hmm.
Is that one way of being able to flex the system? And just to the point about the goals, is that a good reason why we could then shift to Kanban and drop having sprint goals and shift
Yeah.
into more of a Kanban, the
Yeah. Well,
basic
usually
level?
I would say usually people don't understand what a sprint goal is. A sprint goal is not a number of items to deliver. It has to be related to a specific, let's say, a new version of the system you want to install or release. In Scrum, the premise of Scrum is that we increment the product every sprint. Now, if you cannot do this because of constraints, let's say you have dependencies on an external vendor, or you need to coordinate with other teams inside a company. Um, it's hard to say, at the end of the sprint, we have a real increment that we can
Yeah,
potentially ship, right?
yeah.
So if you cannot do this, you can have a weekly goal, but it's not necessarily a sprint goal
Mm,
in that sense. Now, maybe you are in a group where every individual have different goals, but they are related to a common objective.
yeah.
That's quite possible as well. But at some point, you just need direction. You don't necessarily need to play on words. And if you are forced to use the word sprint goal, and you feel it's not working, try to use this as your advantage to, what's the list of individual objective we have.
Mm, mm.
The
Well,
goal,
luckily we don't have to, I've just dropped it because it's like this,
yeah,
it's just not working. So
yeah, of course.
people are going to get really tired and frustrated with you trying to enforce sort of like ways of working or the framework onto people if it's just not relevant to that situation.
Exactly. And I think that's what Agile is about. Try something. If it doesn't work, just do something else. That's pretty clear in the Kanban method as well. The managed evolution.
Thank you.
Dave?
Yep.
So my 2 cents on that specific question, because I dealt with it a lot with the last team I was working with. I agree that it can be really, really complex. Something you can try is looking up in the organizational needs and see if all of those things roll up. Say if it's a cost saving initiative, does all of their work relate to a cost saving initiative that you could say we want to reduce cost by 10%, and in this sprint we're going to reduce it 0.5% by all our actions, right? Something of that nature. But also, a lot of folks that I work with want to choose Kanban because they don't want that 2 week time box, right? The benefit of the 2 week time box is you're working for 2 weeks. You get to spin up and spin down, so there's a little bit of break between one sprint and the next. It's also a predictability tool for you. If your team has a particular velocity, then you can say, based on our velocity, if we point ahead, then this is about how long something might take. If your expectation of Kanban from a developer's perspective is we don't have to worry about any of that stuff, you're defeating the purpose of Kanban as well, because you need to be predictable. And if no item that you put on the board has any relatable value in size or completion time to anything else, then you're really being a disservice to the organization, because you won't be predictable at all.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes, the sprint becomes a constraint more than it's more a constraint of a tool that is helpful to you.
Final
Adrian?
question, Adrian?
So thank you. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't actually a question. It was just more on Helen's point, and it's slightly different. I'd just kind of go a bit further back in what Pierre was saying, and kind of personally, I'd stop worrying about Kanban or Scrum and go back to the rules. Right? So what are the rules that the team are obeying that are keeping them in the current situation? What is the rule that they won't break, that's forcing them to stay in that current pattern? Are they holding a belief about we don't do Kanban because, or whatever it is? Yeah. So if you can surface what those rules and beliefs are, then you can help them work out what is a different belief that might be more helpful for them in achieving their goal. Once they've surfaced what their goal is and all the rest of it. So I'd work on that level rather than trying to get them to change, if that makes sense.
Thank you.